Hello and welcome to my presentation on my SUID internship. My name is, of course, Daniel Franklin. I'll be presenting my applied practice experience that was completed. Of course, here are the contents of my presentation. We have the background, introduction, meet my mentor section, major work products, activities, conclusion, and then, of course, the reflection and special thanks. The photo that you see there is just my office that was available to me during my internship. I wanted the full experience to be photographed, but I don't believe I got a picture of just my desk. So the office will have to do. All right. So then, of course, my applied practice experience purpose was to apply the MPH competencies provided by Eastern Washington University, gain some hands-on experience in the public health practice, and make sure that I am able to grow and develop myself as a public health professional and contribute something meaningful to a real local health department. As I mentioned earlier, my applied practice experience was at the Spokane Regional Health District. My supervisor, I was under the supervision of Mia Parker, and of course, my role was a MPH intern. She took me under her wing. We really, hit it off, and I had a very wonderful time with Mia. And just a quick meet my mentor, of course, her name is Mia Parker. She's the Child Fatality Review Coordinator at the Spokane Regional Health District. And essentially, her whole role is to focus on suicide prevention and community efforts, and in an effort to reduce the amount of infant mortality that occurs within Spokane. So she, of course, does a lot of outreach work. Of course, you'll see later she does the annual community baby shower, which has been the second year this year. And she just does a lot of work in terms of child health, child safety, and just making sure that parents have the tools they need when they're welcoming a new little one to their home, or if they're first time parents, things like that. Just making sure that people understand what child fatality is and how to prevent it. So she does a lot of great work there. All right, moving on to my major work products. We, of course, have the evaluation tool that I created, the secondary data analysis, the literature review, and then finally the findings presentation. Two and four are kind of the same. Two is, of course, the data analysis that I performed. But then number four is the actual PowerPoint presentation that I created to present to the staff. Okay. Here we have my evaluation tool slide, and the purpose of this tool was to develop something that a future intern or even my mentor herself could take into a retail setting and physically identify how many images are being depicted as actual unsafe. So, for I guess the purpose of time, uh, for infants, they need to be on a flat surface, a firm flat surface, and to make sure that they are not wrapped up in any blankets. There are no toys, like little stuffed animals, things like that. No pets. You need to make sure you have an awake and alert adult nearby, and just making sure that the infant doesn't have any items that would make them overheat. So a hat or fluffy pajamas. So those types of things are often depicted in infant images, or like things that are marketed towards infants. So just making sure that when you go into retail setting, and I'll explain further later, but when you go into these settings, you can take this tool with you and be able to physically check off how many images you're seeing within the store, where they are located in the store, and what they're depicting, just for your own record. And then it was a little bit too long of a file to kind of include here, so I have the written version. So essentially, the tool here, as you can see, so store information for section one. You put the store name, select the store type. So you'll choose retail, department, thrift store, boutique, or an online store if you're doing that. You can also input the location, the date that you are observing, and then I left a section for the evaluator initials just to make sure that for the future interns and even my mentor, if they're using this in the future, they can make sure they keep track of who did which assessment for their own record. You have the observation summary. So you have the total number of infant sleep related images observed. You have the total number of images depicting unsafe sleep environments, and then just a couple more specifics. So you have, what you're seeing. Do you see a crib, bassinet display? Is it wall signage, posters? What kind of marketing does it look like? And then finally, you have the detailed image evaluation. So this just goes through according to the American Pediatric Academy of Pediatrics Association with their uh, recommendation on safe infant sleep. So, making sure that the image is showing the baby on their back. That's the safest position for baby to be, not on their stomach. No head coverings, no fluffy, heavy pajamas. There's no loose items present. So those bumpers, the pillows, blankets, things like that, you don't want to have depicted because that goes against their recommendations. And then, of course, you have evaluator rating that I put at the end just to kind of gauge how you would rate the retail setting you're going into. So is it, overall, is it safe overall? Are you seeing a lot of more unsafe images? And then finally, just some notes for them to put down. The main purpose overall that my mentor wanted to establish was this uh, small scale. So she wanted to make sure this is something that we could do in Spokane. It's not really for, going out in the country. I mean, you could, but she just wanted to start small. So this is, you take it into the retail setting. It's more to make business owners more aware of the products that they're selling, more so than making sure that, they can change the imagery because, they don't have the power to, contact the distributor and tell them, hey, this is depicting unsafe sleep. They might not have that power, but they might have a little more control of what they're selling, or maybe be able to educate their customers coming in if they have questions. And then here's just a screenshot of the tool. Again, it's a little too long to kind of have the whole thing here, but just to kind of see what that would look like on Microsoft Forms. All right. And then next work product, we have, of course, the SUID data analysis. So this was the data analysis portion of my internship. The first portion was the safe sleep tool, but this was supposed to be the latter half, so the final 3 weeks. So this section, I analyzed the SUID surveillance data. This was from the Spokane Regional Health District database that they have, the chat database, and then the Washington Department of Health death files. So these contained the data on infant mortality rates and deaths over past 20 years and the number of them that were classified as SUID. So with that, and with my mentor and then her coworker, Jazzy, she helped me use R&R Studio, which I actually do have a photo there. It's not zoomed in all the way just because there are, of course, sensitive data files and data within the photo. So just kind of a zoomed out image just to make it a little more, just protect that privacy. But here we have the two screens. So the left side is where I would have the data. So whether it was chat or the DUH files, I would pull that onto the left side, and then the right side is where I used RStudio to perform the data analysis and extract the data that I needed for what I was trying to find. And then here we have a whiteboard kind of brainstorming. Jazzy and I kind of broke down everything so that way the coding was a lot easier for me to do since I'm still in the learning process. The simplest way to explain, because it's a little chaotic, but the simplest way to explain here is I have the deaths over live births times 1,000 to calculate the rate. So in order to do that, to pull the data, you need to attach a flag to the data set. There's a sum function that just basically totals the amount of deaths um, that it finds with that flag, and then the DF dollar sign that helps code for the data frame. So I'm trying to tell R Studio which column and what data I'm trying to extract. So that's how you do that. And then for the single years, you're able to do a function group by, and then in parentheses, whichever year you're looking for. And then the mutate just takes that data set and makes it into a more formatted structure, so that way you're easily able to do the sum and then parentheses of whichever column you chose. So once I was able to get the main data, which is the death totals for each year, then I was able to go through and calculate the death rate for each one. So while I can't report the actual data, again, just confidential information, but I was informed that I could at least mention my findings, which I will, of course, go into later. But this is just kind of the overview of the thought process that went into the data analysis. And next, we have my literature review. So for my literature review, this was between my mentor and myself, of course. Excuse me. She wanted me to make sure that I could identify whatever gaps there were in literature currently, and where the focus needed to be directed. So this was just a paper that I wrote on Microsoft Word. It was mainly focused again on the infant imagery and retail settings, and just how SUID as a whole is being depicted within the media, and how safe sleep for infants is being depicted within the media. And then here's my major findings. So again, I could make a whole presentation on it, but just in short, SUID is basically an umbrella term. So SUID, sudden unexpected infant death, basically is just a term that the coroner could not establish a direct cause of death, or reason as to why the infant passed away. So the best way to explain it is to observe this graph here. I don't know if my mouse is on there, but if you observe the blue line, we have the combined SUID rate from 1990 to 2022. And then the orange here, the sudden infant death syndrome classification. That's when they started graphing that. And then you have the unknown cause in green, and then the accidental suffocation and strangulation in bed in purple. So main takeaway here you can see is when you look at it from just the blue line, it makes it appear as though there are a lot of SUID deaths. When you look at the sudden infant death syndrome line, there seems to be a drastic decrease around 1996. Now, 1996, they did reclassify SUID in a new way, and from that, it included, we have the unknown causes here, and then the accidental suffocation and strangulation in bed. So the terms kind of started getting used interchangeably, which is why you see that drastic decline, but then the increase of the unknown and the accidental strangulation. That kind of alone just highlights that there needs to be a standardization of the term, because over the years there have been too much back and forth with what coroners and medical examiners are using to classify SUID as, when they're presented with a infant that has passed away. Um, the need for it to be standardized just comes from the inconsistencies, and Unfortunately, it is due to the continuation of unsafe sleep environments and the persistent health disparities that certain populations face. Um, with SUID and with how people raise their infants, it comes down to culture a lot of the time. So, for cultures that do a lot of swaddling and have the infant in a bassinet, maybe higher than 10 degrees, which is way higher than the American Academy of Pediatrics recommendation. They have different ways of raising their children. So when physicians are trying to explain SUID and unsafe sleep environments, it's really difficult for certain groups to accept it. Primarily, people of color, minority populations who already may have a lower trust of health professionals. Um, it's kind of just this pull and tug where people don't realize how serious it can be. When they have their infants in a bed with a cute stuffed animal or a toy or something like that. Um, People don't realize that that could be dangerous, and it just comes down to reducing the stigma around oh, you're a bad mom if you aren't doing XYZ, that kind of thing that can occur in society. So basically what needs to happen is we need to start with the imaging, making sure that images are actually depicting um, safe sleep practices. A lot of the times on infant cribs, you'll have a baby with a soft blanket, maybe they're next to a stuffed animal. Baby bumpers are still able to be sold within the US and the world, and those are all items that have been shown to contribute to accidental suffocation and just SUID in general. So there's a lot that goes into it, and I could create again another PowerPoint on this, but the major um, thing to realize is just that we need to just make it more available for everyone to know and understand why it's so dangerous, and that'll go a long way in getting more people on board with safe infant sleep practices. Excuse me. So here we have the activities. This is just the section explaining each one of the activities completed during my internship, and I will start with the safe sleep evaluation tool. Now, it's a little more wordy than I originally intended, but I'll just explain each section. So, for the inputs for the tool, of course, my mentor and myself were part of it, and we made sure that I went through and included evidence based sleep guides, and according with the American Pediatric Academy. And then the activities were reviewing and making sure that the patterns in imagery within retail settings were actually being assessed. And then outputs, the summary of the depiction strengths and gaps, and then using data from that to prevent or to promote prevention messaging. So within health practice. So in short, the outcomes that we wanted to make sure that would come about from this tool is that I could give this tool to a future intern, and they would be able to take it into settings and make sure that people are able to identify what is a safe sleep education material and what is depicted as not. And of course, the development of this, we had weekly check-ins just to make sure that the tool itself was being developed according to the guidelines, and making sure that each question would hit the gaps. So making sure that we're not missing anything in terms of things that had recent recall. So bassinets, um, and anything that just needed to be added onto it. And then the implementation, just the application of it to the selected materials, and then compile the results from that. And within our weekly meetings, we would modify it, and just kind of make sure there's no changes that needed to be done. So just making sure that, if a certain section was a little too long, editing that. And then, of course, the evaluation, the findings reviewed with my supervisor, and just making sure that overall the tool was just looking the way that she would approve of, in a professional way, more so than just like a high school project, making sure everything really was thought through, and put forth in the project. For my literature review, the peer review articles were the inputs, and then the public health reports and surveillance data with my supervisor guidance. We reviewed the literature on the SUID factors, and then terminology and disparities within different groups, and then synthesized the findings for the paper. The output was the written literature summary, and then the evidence based data analysis for the you know paper in general. So we just wanted to make sure that, again, it was just a very in-depth paper. Wanted the outcome to be, figuring out where the gaps were in the literature, and then over the course of the weeks, making sure we developed the review together and implemented any new articles. So she found a couple articles that I could use, that I wanted to make sure I included in that, and then modifying anything. There was a couple sections I had included. She told me to remove. It wasn't in a negative way. It was just more so, she wanted it to really focus on just the imagery, more or less SUID as a whole. Still, include that as part of it, but really just the imaging. Um, and then finally, just making sure that we met every week and reviewed any findings. If I found a new article I wanted to add, running it by her first before adding it, just so that way, I didn't waste any time with adding a source where, she might say, hey, that's not really going to help our review here. So I definitely appreciated that. And then one of the activities I participated in as well was a child fatality review meeting. This was definitely something new. I had never done anything like this before. And going to this meeting in general was very, very changing. It affected me in the way of, these are real cases, real people, real cases, and you have to put aside any judgment, put aside any stigma, association, anything like that, because you are there to review, a child case. A child lost their life due to some factor, and this is something you need to make sure you understand, that you are not there to judge. You're there to figure out what went wrong, any factors in their life that could have contributed to the death, and if it was preventable. My mentor, as the coordinator for the regional health district, she of course led the meeting and made it very clear to everyone who was there. Um, you know, there were other community members. There was the Boys and Girls Club, I believe. We had a couple judges and other health organizations, Chaz as well. So a lot of people came together, for this activity, and it was really something to contribute to discussing public health data within a group setting, and observe, uh, different groups interacting with each other, and coming up with conclusions based off of their background. So we had a couple people who actually knew some of the children that were mentioned in the case, and while that was also difficult to listen to, it was important. Very important to understand that, again, these are real cases. Um, and at the end of it, after learning about the cases, discussing, my mentor and I had a reflection, just kind of more so learning outcomes, figuring out, what did I learn from it? Um, what what could I do in the future with this information? So for me, just understanding, like, I can assess cases and no matter how hard they are, and just look at it through a public health lens rather than rushing to judgment, because that's not going to do any good for advancing public health initiatives in order to prevent deaths. So that was very, very beneficial. And finally, this was at the end of my internship. We had the community baby shower. My mentor put on a baby shower for, well, really it's for anybody, but it was at the YMCA, and it's for new parents, returning parents, low income. If you needed assistance, this was for you. The Spokane regional staff and community partners were there, and along with educational materials, infant supplies, there were prizes. People could win. There was, let's see, there was pajamas, baby pumps, there were, toys, little teddy bears, things like that. So they had a booth for vaccinations, so people could get some information on how to set up their child for their vaccinations. And then just, making sure that people just understood, the purpose of it. There's no judgment here. If you need help, um, if you need help with anything, we're here to give you the information. So just participating in that outreach effort and just having that communication with the community was very, definitely beneficial for that part of my internship, because I was able to actually apply what I know. Because people ask me, hey, what is safe infant sleep? I don't know what that is. My mentor had a booth, a separate booth, that had an educational game where she explained what SUID was, safe infant sleep practices, things like that. She basically just had a educational seminar the whole day, just educating people, and people were coming to me saying, "Hey, I want to go to Mia's presentation. I don't know what it is," and they're just trying to figure out what it is before they go into it, to see if they even if they just had questions about it. And it was very um, it was definitely a confidence booster to realize that I had information. What is SUID? What is safe infant sleep? Being able to help people understand what those meant definitely showed that I actually, retained the information that I was taught, but also able to educate others. So, because that's the whole point. And then here we have my booth here. As far as taking photos, there were just a lot of families, a lot of children. I wanted to take an overview photo. However, with the setup of the baby shower and just getting everything ready, by the time I was going to take a photo of it, I could really only snap a picture of my booth. But here it is. The This year was the most showing. They had 83 families, which was more, I believe, last year they had 40 or something like that, something close to 40 families that showed up. So this was a huge jump, and a lot of people had, they had fun. There's pizza, there's food, and just information. It was just great to see, all these people who, they, whatever their background, didn't matter. You're there for help, you're there to learn about how to be, a better parent, and it was just great to be a part of that. And again, I had the booth there with the raffles, and at the end, I just drew some names, and people thanked me for helping them understand what SUID was, safe sleep, and I'm very glad I was a part of that. All right, on to the competencies. So for my internship, there were quite a few. I had to kind of narrow it down. But to start, we'll have CPH 1, which was apply epidemiological methods to public health practice. I did this through analyzing infant mortality and SUID rates and identifying trends, risk factors. So using population health data and applying those epidemiologic concepts um, during the child fatality review, just developing the tool in general. Pretty much every part of that was CPH1. And then the work products, of course, we have the data analysis, findings, presentation. and then the Safe Infant Sleep Depiction Evaluation Tool. 2. CEPH2, select appropriate quantitative and qualitative data collection methods. So for the evaluation tool, of course, I had to make sure that I was applying the quantitative, so infant deaths, things like that, understanding how the uh, way I am choosing the data would affect, my results. So I had to make sure, especially for my literature review and the infant sleep depiction tool, I had to make sure that the qualitative data was beneficial, because it's really easy to jump to feelings and find, people pointing fingers and things like that. So just making sure that when you're looking for data that is qualitative, um, whether it's opinions and whatnot, you are actually grabbing what's relevant. So just kind of going through the articles, making sure that I actually reviewed the proper material, and I had to run it by my mentor just to make sure we were on the right track. And number 6, structural bias, social inequities, and racism in health outcomes. So, examining the SUID health discrepancies through the literature review was, of course, my major point. Understanding that there are certain groups that just don't understand what sudden unexpected infant death is, and then just the overall mistrust of physicians. So, with a lot of low income people of color, those groups. In Spokane, we have the Marshallese population, that their trust in healthcare is not as strong, maybe as other groups, just because they're not the same. However, they may be feeling, those kind of things just help um, fuel that kind of fire of structural bias, and just identifying that definitely helped me align this competency through, of course, the literature review, and then directly talking to people at the community baby shower. CEPH7, assess population needs, assets, and capacities. So this competency, pretty much the community baby shower and the sleep depiction evaluation tool, both of those just honestly were just hand in hand, because I had to evaluate the community, but also evaluate the just in general how uh, SUID and infant sleep images influence those populations, and then just whatever gaps that are present. So a lot of the times, what I would find, especially as I was researching for the tool, is just again with low income populations, or just populations that might not have as direct access to healthcare, or online. Those populations might just genuinely not have the capacity to understand. So making sure that those populations are acknowledged, and that the tools are put in place and implementations are put in place, interventions, sorry, are put in place to increase that access. Because if people don't understand that there is a problem, they can't do anything about it. So identifying those gaps was absolutely crucial to this part of my internship. C9, design a population based policy, program, project, or intervention. The data analysis findings presentation that I did at the end of my internship, I presented, to the staff, and made sure to include the Safe Infant Sleep Depiction tool, because that was the whole premise of the internship. Designing this project that could be used for future interns. I really took this one to heart, because I was physically creating something that could be used within an actual public health organization, and other people will benefit too. So just supporting the development of that, and focusing on safe sleep initiatives and using the data found in the literature, went a long way in developing that. And I'm just glad I was able to contribute meaningfully for future interns that may find themselves with Mia as well. And finally, I have CPH 19, Communicate Public Health Content Effectively. Again, I presented my findings and just the internship in general to the Spokane Regional Health District staff. It essentially was just, a compilation of everything I had done throughout the program with Mia over the 6 weeks, and just, telling them my findings, which, like, honestly, that whole presentation was, it was great. It felt like I was a real, public health professional. I was there, showing my findings, ultimately with the findings of my review, and just with like everything. Ultimately, we realized that the regional health district and the DOH, their definition of SUID, turned out to be the same. See, the data that my mentor had found was that it looked like the rates had been differently reported from the Spokane Regional Health District and the Department of Health. So my whole purpose of analyzing the data was to see if there was truly a difference in the rates. And what I found was, thankfully, that there weren't any differences in the rates. It just more so happened to be related to the live birth rate, or the count. So if that was off by, one or two, whether, someone mistyped something, that kind of thing, didn't happen very often, but there was a couple where, okay, it was off by one or off by two. So during that, just making sure I communicated my findings to them, just to let them know that, hey, like, the work that you guys are doing is great, and that it was good to find out that there was no difference in the findings. That just maybe, the data analysis portion and the data presenting portion might just need to be a little refined, because there might be discrepancies with certain data points that can affect the rates a little bit. So yes, of course. And then now we have my conclusion. The regional health district internship as a whole, I learned so much, and I could probably make 5, 10 more presentations on it. But overall, I really was able to apply, public health theory in a real workplace setting and actually gain some hands-on experience. I didn't know really anything about SUID or SUID prevention or anything before that. So my internship was not only a learning experience on the fundamental level, but I really learned a new health topic, and honestly, I'm pretty passionate about it now. I mean, you spend 6 weeks researching and understanding the work that goes into prevention work for a topic like this, and just you really get attached to it. I really feel as though I could help people understand what this topic is, and I really feel like I gained actual concrete um, knowledge and skills that I can actually use in the future, which is absolutely wonderful. Then we have my reflection. My mentor and I went to Cedar Coffee here in Spokane, just to have a little, last one-on-one. And it was also a reflection time. She just asked me, hey, how did I feel about the internship? How do I feel in general? How, what are my feelings? And honestly, I just told her I feel like I built some very practical skills. I made sure that, I could actually confirm, that my interests were correct. I want to work in data. I want to perform data analysis. I want to help people on a population level, and understanding people on a population level really just in a way that I can actually make a meaningful difference. And for me, that was definitely part of my professional development because, beforehand I thought, I'm part of the MPH program here at Eastern Washington University. And while I felt, like a public health professional, it's much different when you actually get into the field and you're walking into that building with your intern badge and you really feel as though you're contributing to something greater than yourself. And through my whole internship, I realized while my main interest is in epidemiology and disease tracking, I absolutely love the idea of social epidemiology. I didn't know about it until my internship, and my mentor informed me about it, telling me, "Hey, this is a field that you could look into." She really recognized that I genuinely have a passion for helping people, and I want to understand the social drivers that actually create um, health disparities within populations, not only for SUID but just for any even communicable diseases. So in the future, within next 10 years, I hope to be in an epidemiology role, whether social or disease tracking, maybe a combination of both, because it's really important to understand how um, populations are affected um, by certain factors, and then that contributes to health disparities. So, if a group is unable to access clean water, they might, have a lot more gastrointestinal infections um, because of that. If they're not getting clean water, that's definitely something that could affect them. So, a little simple of example, but just overall, understanding myself as a public health professional and a person really came through in this internship. And I'm so thankful for Mia and everybody at the regional health district for helping me to understand myself and just help me grow as a professional. And then, just in honor of Black History Month, I do have a quote just from Martin Luther King Jr. "Of all the forms of inequity, injustice in healthcare is the most shocking and inhuman." And without going too much into that, I truly resonate with this quote, just because there's so much injustice. People deserve to be healthy. There shouldn't be a reason why people are in certain disadvantages simply because of how they have been brought into the world, or the environment they live in. So that goes for SUID, that goes for chronic illnesses, everything. People deserve to be healthy, and I really will take that quote and that idea into my own public health practice. Wherever I end up, my whole goal is just to reduce inequity within the population, and just make sure that more people are able to access the things that they need, and access the care that they deserve, because at the end of the day, we're all humans, we're all human beings, we all deserve to be healthy, we all deserve to live our best life. And if I can help do something about that in the future, I will absolutely make that my goal. And then finally, I just have a quick thank you to the Spokane Regional Health District. Thank you to Mia, of course, for her absolutely incredible mentoring. Her coworker Jazzy, that works in the data center, helping me with the coding and all of the R Studio data manipulation. Mark Springer, that also works at the Regional Health District as the epidemiology manager. He gave me the most amazing pointers of what I need to be doing now to prepare myself for a future in epidemiology, which I have been taking to heart, learning uh, data programs, working with data. I am trying to take everything that he and all the other staff has told me into heart and into consideration, just to make sure I'm setting myself up for success. And finally, we have Natalie. I worked with her at Feed Cheney in Eastern Washington University. She did the Feed Cheney program for quite a few years and started the whole program. So hot meal distribution for the city of Cheney is for anybody, but a lot of the people were low income. And honestly, she is one of the reasons why I found Spokane Regional Health District to do my internship in. She recommended me to her coworker Mia, who was in search of an intern, and I'm very glad this whole applied practice experience worked out. And I'm very thankful to everybody who put forth effort within my internship just to make sure that I got the most comprehensive experience. And I will forever be thankful. So thank you everybody. And that is the end. Thank you so much.